Who plays new Dreamcast games in 2024? I sent out a survey on Twitter, Discord and Kickstarter asking players of independent Dreamcast games 21 simple questions. In this video I'm going to go over the responses we got for the first 7 questions. I'm going to talk about what surprised us and some of our plans for future releases. For those of you who don't know, we are HarleQuest Games. We're a new independent game studio focusing on bringing new games to old platforms like the Sega Dreamcast. With online surveys like this, it's quite challenging to get people to actually fill them in, so we're really grateful to everyone who participated. We've got 164 responses total. I'd quickly like to plug our new game HarleQuest before we get on with the answers. HarleQuest is a new roguelike dungeon crawler for the Sega Dreamcast. You can check it out at harle.quest, or you can go onto orcface.com to pre-order the game now. Thanks. Question 1. Which of the following are you? Select all that apply. Avid gamer, creative professional, Dreamcast developer, Dreamcast publisher, journalist, retro game store owner, social media influencer, streamer, YouTube content creator, or other. This question tries to give a sense of who actually responded to the survey. As I work with and talk to a lot of people who fall into one or more of these categories, I was curious how much of our audience were gamers first and just enjoy playing the games, and how many people actually work on games in some respect. The result was 82% are avid gamers, 15% are creative professionals, 15% are Dreamcast developers, 10% are YouTube content creators, 7% are streamers, 6% describe themselves as casual or part-time gamers, and 6% are retro game collectors. No other category had more than 2 people in it, but one person is a self-proclaimed lazy bum. I was really surprised that so few of the audience are involved in any of the fields mentioned, given the circles that I'm in, and it shows that there's a lot of people who just want good games, and that's what we all have in common. While over 82% would describe themselves as avid gamers, curiously, 10% are casual, probably due to other commitments like work and family. Question 2. How many indie Dreamcast games have you purchased for yourself or for a friend in either CD-ROM or digital download format? 21% have purchased 21 or more indie Dreamcast games. Wow. Another 16% have purchased between 10 and 20. Another 16% have purchased between 5 and 9. Another 36% have purchased between 1 and 4, and only 11% have never paid for an indie Dreamcast game. These results really blew me away. I had no idea so many people had collections with what must be just about every independent release. It gives me a lot of confidence that people who want independent releases are ready to buy, and that they'll happily add new games to their collection. 11% never paying for an indie release could be review copies, it could be piracy, or they could simply be developers who aren't interested in other games. I thought that was really interesting. Question 3. How many of these purchases, from question 2, are physical releases on CD-ROM? 18% have purchased 21 or more physical releases, 17% between 10 and 20, 13% between 5 and 9, 37% between 1 and 4, and 15% have never purchased a physical release. Again, this is great. It means the vast majority of players who buy indie games want a physical copy of the game, and for a publisher like us, a large part of our business is focusing on real physical games with boxes and instruction manuals that you can hold in your hand and put on your shelf. And that said, of course we want to provide a digital version of our game as well for those using some kind of emulation. Question 4. Of these physical releases, were most purchased online, at retro gaming events, or from physical brick and mortar stores? 59% buy their physical releases purely online. Another 22% buy most of their physical releases online. Another 6% are an even split between online and in person, and fewer than 3% buy most of their releases in person. This is a landslide in favour of online sales. However, we need to remember that this is an online survey answered by people on social media, and the number of people who might actually buy a physical indie release in person but have no Dreamcast-centric online presence is something that we'll be looking into in the future as we start to sell our games at in-person events, so that's going to be super interesting. But yeah, a lot of interest in buying physical releases online. That seems to be the focus of the market. Question 5. Does your Dreamcast have internet access? 29% don't go online with their Dreamcast, but a good game might inspire them to do so. 24% use a DreamPie with the stock Dreamcast modem. 18% use a broadband adapter or a LAN adapter. 17% don't go online and don't intend to. 4% don't actually have a physical Dreamcast. The remaining 8% are waiting for a more convenient physical solution to getting online. It's honestly great that so many players like to hook up their Dreamcast to the net in 2024. One of our future game ideas is online focused, and these results tell us that a good game coupled with convenient hardware could be a big hit, and it could encourage more players to get online with their Dreamcast. Question 6. How important is it that indie Dreamcast games push the hardware graphically? 43% say it's quite important, but they'd still buy an indie game purely on gameplay or art style. 42% say it's not very important and that gameplay and art style matter a lot more. 9% say it's very important, that they only want to buy games that push the DC to its limits. The remaining 6% had various things to say, like it's important for the graphics to make sense for the platform, I'm not interested in 8-bit games or NES ports, and I'm not interested in any 2D games. I'll admit this one surprised me. I often hear people asking for highly polished 3D Dreamcast games with lots of effects and that really push the hardware to the limit. I'll admit that I'm interested in that side of things, but ultimately I think gameplay and art style win out for me, and it's interesting that so much of the community seem to share that perspective. The more nuanced answers are quite interesting too. There definitely seems to be a desire for Dreamcast-y games rather than ports from older systems, even if the graphics aren't necessarily pushed to the limits, and I can understand that. Question 7. How important is it for indie Dreamcast games to have unique gameplay? 47% say it's quite important, 1 or 2 new elements or a twist on an old idea is fine. 43% say it's not very important, I'm happy with pre-existing gameplay concepts as long as the game's polished and fun. 9% say it's very important, I won't buy a game if it doesn't offer something new gameplay-wise. The remaining 1 player says, I'd really like to see 3D platforms with hub worlds and collection mechanics, also 3D beat 'em up. Cool. As a game developer, I personally care a lot about not being too derivative and always trying to do something a bit different. I often wonder if HarleQuest is too derivative a concept, but I believe there's enough creativity in the details of the gameplay that people won't feel like the game is too unoriginal. But it seems I don't have much to worry about. 90% of players are happy with 1 or 2 new elements or a twist on an old idea. Those first 7 questions had some really interesting responses. Some surprises, like the fact so many people purchased 21 or more indie releases, and some that reinforce what we already know about the community, like the prevalence of online sales. Knowing that we can encourage more gamers to go online with the right hardware and games is quite reassuring too. In the next video, we will go over the next 7 questions, including what mods do you have installed, what kinds of new games would you like to see, and what other platforms are you interested in. See you next time.